A huge push for e-commerce in India, for a revolution in India, for entrepreneurship in India, for startups in India. Stand Up India is the message of the Prime Minister. It was very interesting when he said that Startup India and Stand Up India are absolutely synonymous for him, because it's starting up India and all the entrepreneurship which will lead to profound growth, and not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of social inclusion as well. Joining us to discuss all of this, Arvind Gupta, the national head of the IT cell of the BJP, Bipinpreet Singh, founder and CEO of MobiKwik, Rajiv Kumar, the CEO and founder of Hippo Innovations Private Limited, and also Srivats Krishna, the Secretary of E-Governance at the Government of Karnataka. He joins us from Bangalore. He's speaking in his personal capacity. Thank you all very much for joining us. Bipinpreet, let me come to you first. Do you share the enthusiasm of the Prime Minister and so many others? It was a day of celebration. There was a lot of rhetoric from the beginning of the day, but he really did steal the thunder at the end of the day when he announced all of these schemes. And the biggest one, perhaps, tax exemptions on capital gains and profits from startups will be tax exempt for a period of 3 years. What does this message send to your sector?
Absolutely. You know, I am a founder of a startup. I've been running a startup for the last 5 to 6 years. In the history of the entrepreneurship in India, this is the first time I have seen the government, the Indian government and Prime Minister, no less, coming up and talking about startups. I think all the fact that we are talking about that today in this show, and the fact that there is so much attention on this, that in itself is a huge achievement. Before going into the details, I think that fact itself should be celebrated, and you know, that will make a lot of would-be entrepreneurs, you know, take that decision. That would make capital available more freely, because the sentiment has improved, where the Prime Minister himself is talking about this. So I think, you know, that is for me the biggest takeaway, is because I have never seen the government or the entire government apparatus, you know, talking about startups and things which matter to startups.
Okay. Now, Arvind, it's not just about startups and the profitability of certain organizations, and of course that is welcomed, and of course the Prime Minister has encouraged profitability. It's also about ultimately helping India at so many levels. Isn't that what the Prime Minister's larger goal would have been?
And absolutely, and actually it's a, you know, while startups will solve problems which you know, where there is a gap in society, I think the Prime Minister's call to action today was to really use Indian innovation to solve the problems of India and then take it globally. So he mentioned problems of, you know, in areas of health, in problems in area of financial inclusion, problems in areas of, you know, the supply chain, the losses in the post-harvest losses, education, quality education, cyber security. So all societal issues that need to be solved in India by Indian innovators, by Indian entrepreneurs, and he just kick-started this whole thing today.
But there is no real quick fix. We need ideas, workable ideas, ideas which would ultimately be profitable, because otherwise entrepreneurs would not have the incentive to do it. So in as much as the Prime Minister hopes that this will take us to the next level, there has to be those ideas that need to come through, companies that need to come through, entrepreneurs that need to come through. Would you agree? I'll come to you, Arvind, in a second.
Yeah, completely. And rightly mentioned, there are billion minds we have in India, and if all these minds work in an innovative way, and with the support of government in terms of easy policy and all, so we can really make a huge difference.
Arvind, you want to add to that?
I want to add to that very simply. See, the entrepreneurs will take over. Once they get the encouragement that my two colleagues over here are talking about, they are best suited to solve some of the problems, because they faced a lot of those problems while growing up. They will take over. Let the entrepreneur take over. Let's create the creators. And that was the theme today. Let's remove the obstacles. Let the government play minimum role, and let the entrepreneurs take over. So things that are ideas, some will fail, and that is part of the entrepreneurial learning system.
Yeah.
But a lot will solve problems. And you know, there were some examples today. Some lady entrepreneur is trying to solve the human genome problem sitting here in India, make in India. Somebody is solving the warehouse logistics problems, making robots in India. So, you know, trust, as he rightly said, trust a billion people to solve 1 million problems. There are more people and lesser problems. And that was the Prime Minister's message. There is 1 billion people to solve 1 million problems.
Okay. Srivatsa is somebody who's been associated with e-governance so closely and with several projects. And of course, you are here in your personal capacity. There are a couple of clauses which the Prime Minister introduced, which I find very interesting. Would you like to tell us why it's important? Patent, I beg your pardon, IPR and patents will be protected, says the Prime Minister. This has been a huge concern, number one. Number two, there will be a significant discount on patent fees. How does this protect entrepreneurs?
Vishnu, I think this is the single biggest policy declaration ever since the 1991 decontrol. In one single shot, Mr. Narendra Modi has arrested the secular decline which was seen in this country for the last decade or so. And I think it is the single biggest policy announcement. Copyright in India has often meant the right to copy, and by protecting the patents and copyrights and making it easy for companies to register by bringing down the cost of registration, I think he's done yeoman service which will unleash the animal spirits of entrepreneurs in the very same way as it was done in 1991. I think in fact this is much, much bigger. I think the other important, two or three important things which have come out of today's policy is to involve the startups in solving difficult public problems, in procurement related issues. Government of Karnataka was the first to set up a startup warehouse in partnership with NASSCOM 2 years ago. And I'm very happy and proud to report that over 10 states have now copied and replicated this, and we are doing very, very well. We have the first mobile IoT lab and a mobile design lab. All these are seeds which are being planted, and Mr. Modi's policy kick today will take this to another level. In short, I think he has proved that India doesn't have just 14 unicorns which are written about. The single biggest unicorn out of India is Narendra Modi and today's policy.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other interesting parts of what you've seen? For example, a 10,000 crore dedicated fund. The government willing to put in money to encourage entrepreneurs. All the labs that the Prime Minister was speaking about in trying to get ideas to actually fructify into something significant.
I think while that's a great idea,
So,
I think, from a government's point of view, as Prime Minister Modi said today, we have to tell them what not to do, which is that the government, needs to get out of the, the business of starting businesses and starting startups. And therefore, while 10,000 crore fund is a great announcement, government should not be playing the role of investing in startups. Ultimately,
that is the reason it's a fund of funds.
Yes.
So I must correct there. It's a fund of funds. The government is going to invest in funds which have the competence to make the decisions and can invest better. But the government will play as a limited partner in those funds, as an investor in those funds, and just catalyze those funds with capital.
They will
nothing else.
not be managers of business.
No.
Yep.
Absolutely not. Let me clarify that.
Yeah, and I hope these funds will be distributed across the different sectors, like
Of
evenly.
course. So that is what a fund of fund concept says.
Yeah.
You create the capital across multiple funds, people who are experts at making investments. So people who have made investments in any of the big companies like yourself, they are the best suited to make those investment decisions.
Yeah.
So the government only funds provided, and that's what the best sovereign funds across the world have done.
Yes.
So it's a very important thing. But while adding to that, if I can make
Yes,
2 or 3 other
please.
points, Vishnu, capital is always one thing. Giving the right policy framework was a second impetus. The marketing of a startup India, the potential of India was a third thing, which the CEO Narendra Modi, and as Srivastava rightly put it, the unicorn from India is doing it. But another very important announcement has been the procurement side. The government will make it easy for startups to sell their technology to government also. The experience and the qualification of experience and tenure and turnover will not apply to qualified startups. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah,
That's a
that is
change of policy, of mindset of government to absorb innovation. Today we are great creators of innovation sometimes, but we find it very hard to sell to our own government to solve societal problems. I think that's very important.
So I think another point is about this, the collaboration between academia and industry that the Prime Minister touched upon, including the, the Grand Incubator initiative. If you see world over, great startups and great startup ecosystems are built in clusters, and they are built in clusters like Silicon Valley, like Beijing, like Israel, and we hope that we can create such clusters in Bangalore as well as in Delhi NCR. And I think that collaboration between academia and industry is still to a large extent missing as far as the Indian startup ecosystem is concerned.
Srivats, would you like to add to that the clustering of talent of entrepreneurs in these labs? For example, at a different level and at a different time, there was Cyberabad, which you were closely involved in sort of working towards or building. In a sense, that was very much a cluster. Is this an extension of ideas like that?
I think it is. If you look at Bangalore, we are today the second largest IT cluster on the planet after Silicon Valley, with 1.1 million IT professionals. And a study recently said by 2020 we will overtake Silicon Valley to become the single largest IT cluster on the planet with 2 million professionals. And there's a very close interaction between academia, government and industry in Karnataka, thanks to the impetus taken by the government. The government has been very, very aggressive in this. And these are not, vision groups set up for the sake of it to pay lip service. We have vision groups in IT, in biotech, headed by captains of industry who give us guidance, who tell us where we go wrong, where we are going right. And to just give you one example, along with Professor C.N.R. Rao, Government of Karnataka is working in the Science and Technology Vision Group to improve science and technology infrastructure in colleges, Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. IT Vision Group under Chris Gopalakrishnan is setting up IT incubators, startup incubators in engineering colleges in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities to grab the ideas from there first so that they become feeders to the startup warehouse. So the Defense of India rules, which is the mothership, which is the origin of many of government's rules, is not valid today. I think it's an anachronism of the past, and the one big thing this policy today does sweeps it away completely in the spirit of minimum government and maximum governance.
Rajiv, another point which we actually saw coming out in one of those reports is the age of entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs is 30-35.
Yeah.
This is very much the future of India if it works at the scale at which India, the Prime Minister wants it to work. This is employment for lakhs of people going forward into the future. This is very much an area which the Prime Minister sees as driving India, economically, socially, at so many levels. But youth is the key part of it.
Yeah, I certainly agree. So instead of focusing, when VCs think about startups, they think from a different perspective. When government think about startups, they should think from a different perspective. So government should not think about creating few billionaire entrepreneurs, but should think about creating millions of smaller entrepreneurs who are not working towards maximizing the profit, but working towards innovative ideas for the well-being of the nation.